Welcome back to the Layman's Globe for another explainer. We've been talking a ton about the fragile US-Iran Memorandum and, the massive push to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. But today we're doing something a little different. We're decoding the hidden diplomacy that actually made all of that happen. We're going back to June 2026 to figure out how a completely unexpected nation became the Middle East's ultimate peace broker. The real story here isn't just the agreement itself, it's the invisible architecture that held it all together.
I mean, think about it. How exactly does a debt-ridden nation broker the biggest peace deal of the decade? That's what we're unpacking today, because the paradox of this whole geopolitical breakthrough is just absolutely fascinating. Let's be real. Pakistan entered this crisis globally known for domestic instability, crippling debt, and serious security issues. Yet, somehow, they emerged as the named mediator and official witness to a 14-point memorandum that literally paused a massive regional crisis.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1, we'll look at the unlikely peace broker. 2, exactly why Washington and Tehran agreed to this setup. 3, the timeline of this secret deal. 4, Pakistan's rewards and massive risks. And finally, 5, the super fragile 60-day window. Right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the unlikely peace broker, and the anatomy of a geopolitical paradox. Look, Pakistan didn't just wake up one morning and become a global superpower. That's not what happened. Instead, for one critical, incredibly high-stakes moment, they became uniquely useful to every single side at the exact same time. We usually think of global power purely in terms of, massive GDP or overwhelming military dominance. But to stop this specific war, those standard metrics just weren't the right tools for the job. So Pakistan didn't force this peace. What they did was provide what we can call diplomatic plumbing. They built this essential, quiet channel that let Washington and Tehran actually test out a bargain. And the genius of it was they could do this without having to trust each other, officially recognize each other, or worse, directly capitulate. When you have two deeply distrustful governments, that plumbing is literally just as important as the water flowing through it. And this wasn't about imposing their will on the region. It was all about intense, synchronized coordination. Pakistan managed to get its civilian government, its military leadership, and its foreign ministry completely aligned into one highly disciplined communication channel. They proved they could handle the tough messages, grind through late-night draft revisions, and keep the whole fragile thing moving without letting it collapse under the immense pressure. Moving on to Section 2, why Washington and Tehran agreed, or as I like to think of it, the perfect puzzle piece. Pakistan really was the absolute perfect puzzle piece here. For Washington, it offered plausible neutrality. Pakistan wasn't part of the US-Israeli military campaign, meaning they could pass along hard messages without being viewed as an immediate threat. And for Tehran, well, Pakistan offered a dignified, neighboring route to Gulf and Asian partners. Iran didn't have to surrender directly to the United States, which was an absolute deal-breaker for them. Now, a huge strategic asset Pakistan brought to the table was their military coherence. Look, sensitive channels need to move lightning fast, and they have to remain completely leak-proof. Because Pakistan's military was visibly involved in the mediation, the security assurances they were bouncing between Washington and Tehran actually carried genuine structural weight. It wasn't just talk. But underneath all of this complex diplomacy, let's not forget the ultimate driving force. It was a shared, absolute terror of a catastrophic global oil shock and a widening war right on Pakistan's border. Both the US and Iran knew that if the nearly 20 million barrels of crude that crossed the Strait of Hormuz every single day were permanently blocked, the global economic fallout would be devastating. I mean, truly catastrophic. And it was exactly that mutual fear that created the desperate window for Islamabad to step in. Okay, Section 3, the timeline of a secret deal. Let's trace this from the early talks to the actual Islamabad Memorandum. The speed of this is just wild. Over just a couple of months, Pakistan goes from being merely an acceptable indirect channel back in early April into a full-on draft manager by late May, literally pausing U.S. attack plans while proposals were being assessed. And then by mid-June, the White House is sending Congress the 14-point Islamabad Memorandum, formally naming Pakistan as the mediator and witness. I mean, going from back-channel whispers to the formal diplomatic record that fast is a staggering acceleration. When you look closely, you can see a really clear division of labor. Pakistan was the one handling the high-wire messaging, the late-night revisions, and building that crucial political trust, but they definitely lacked the capacity for deep financial guarantees. So what happens? Qatar steps in seamlessly to provide the heavy-lifting financial assurances and discreet access. It was the perfect tag team to bridge those final stubborn gaps. Pakistan's winning formula here was, surprisingly, deliberate ambiguity. They figured out how to be useful without demanding any kind of ideological alignment. Basically, they just kicked the absolute hardest questions, stuff like permanent nuclear restrictions and total sanctions relief, down the road into a 60-day window. By deferring the impossible stuff, they locked in an interim agreement and brilliantly converted their behind-the-scenes facilitation into massive, highly public international status. Which brings us to Section 4, Pakistan's rewards and risks, the heavy cost of visibility.
Obviously, the immediate payout is huge. It's a stunning diplomatic comeback narrative for Pakistan. Almost overnight, they shifted their global image from a crisis-prone aid recipient to a vital top-tier problem solver. This gives them renewed relevance in Washington, way stronger standing with the Gulf monarchies, and crucially, it sends a massive signal of stability to China for all those regional energy corridors.
But, and this is a massive but, here is the vulnerability pivot. The exact same ambiguity that made this deal possible also makes it incredibly fragile. If this pact falls apart, Pakistan is going to be caught right in the crossfire. Washington might accuse them of enabling Iranian bad faith, or Tehran might accuse them of just transmitting U.S. pressure. When you step into the spotlight like this, you expose yourself to extreme, simultaneous pressure from Iran, Saudi Arabia, Israel, the U.S., and China.
Now, a common question that always pops up in this kind of regional analysis is about India. Does this mean India lost? Not at all. Pakistan won a very task-specific diplomatic headline that was perfectly suited for wartime mediation. India, on the other hand, still maintains its massive leverage purely through its market size. Plus, they stand to gain enormously from the economic relief of a stabilized global oil market. So both nations actually find very different but significant advantages in the fallout of this memorandum.
Let's hit our final section. Section 5, the fragile 60-day window, the ticking clock. Make absolutely no mistake about this. Pakistan's new status is highly contingent. They gained a temporary diplomatic window, not a permanent seat at the great power table. This memorandum is, at its core, a ceasefire architecture, held together by immediate economic incentives. Pakistan's new prestige is only going to last if they can actually help manage the absolutely grueling implementation phase over the next 60 days.
And if we game out the future scenarios, the danger is staring us right in the face. Sure, if a durable agreement holds, Pakistan is cemented as a recognized crisis mediator. But what if things go south? Say there's an escalation in Lebanon. Remember, Israel and Hezbollah are operating completely outside of this specific negotiating room. Or what if there's a total breakdown between the US and Iran? The entire comeback narrative could collapse overnight, leaving Pakistan to take the blame from literally everyone. Bringing this all back to the physical reality of the Strait of Hormuz, financial markets might react instantly to a signed piece of paper, but physical realities absolutely do not. A beautifully written memorandum doesn't just magically sweep away sea mines. It doesn't guarantee safe maritime passage, and it definitely doesn't bring 12 million barrels of shut-in oil production back online by tomorrow morning. If those physical logistics fail, the economic dividend shrinks, and this whole deal could shatter into a million pieces.
Ultimately, Pakistan didn't suddenly become powerful enough to control the Middle East. But for a few critical, incredibly tense months in the spring of 2026, they became perfectly connected enough to stop two deeply entrenched enemies from talking past each other. They provided the plumbing that pulled the globe back from a catastrophic, wider war. So, I'll leave you with this final thought. As that incredibly difficult 60-day clock ticks down and the vague, hopeful promises of the Islamabad Memorandum face the harsh, grinding reality of implementation, will Pakistan's diplomatic plumbing hold up when the world inevitably demands permanent answers? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer on the layman's globe. Keep asking the hard questions, and we'll see you next time.